Very happy to meet with all of you, and I met some of you at lunch, but definitely look forward to continuing our conversation dialogue beyond this presentation. So I lead the investments and corporate platforms for cybersecurity inside Cisco, and I'm really excited to talk about how I see the sector shaping up, the moves that are happening. Hitesh, I think, alluded to this, but this is a pretty massive and confusing space. It's a space with $100 billion in spending budget, super fragmented. This $100 billion is spread across 30, 40 subsectors, and each sector has got point solutions. Companies in one sector don't talk to companies in other sectors. So how do you make sense of all of that? I'll try to demystify the security sector to an extent today over the next 30 minutes. I've titled my presentation as Self-Attack, into attack yourself. And the title is very deliberate, and I'll get into that in just a minute. So Hitesh spoke about the fact that I've got a tough challenge at my point in executing all this M&A and investments. But trust me, my toughest challenge right now is trying to find ways to buy tickets for Avengers Endgame. if any of you have a couple of tickets, please do let me know. I mean, the Fandango website crashed. It's broken all records even before release, so obviously something special with that movie.
They weren't using the Avi network.
You're listening.
Well done, Maya, well
Paying
done.
attention.
If you want to watch a Hyperflex presentation, we have like 100 tickets.
At this point, I'll take even a presentation copy of the movie. That's fine. I'll settle for that. But I think, in all seriousness, the picture here, the poster here, is more reflective of Captain America's Civil War. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie, but that's a movie in which the Avengers team breaks into two camps who fight each other. There's one camp that believes in government oversight, and another camp that believes that government is dumb and we know better. And they engage into a fight with each other. But it made me thinking, if you believe that Avengers are the most equipped and competent fighters out there, what better way to test your defenses than having them fight among each other? And that's what the space of continuous monitoring and security is all about. If you believe you have the best security talent in-house, you need to get these very super special security talent to break your security system, see if they can break it, and then see if you have another team that can repel these attacks. And that's why I believe that the future of security would move towards continuous monitoring, where you are standing up blue teams. Blue teams are teams that are basically defending the attacks, and red teams are your own personnel trying to break your security posture. That's where the dollars are moving, and that's where the action would move from a customer standpoint as well. So if there was one takeaway for all of you from a security standpoint, it's this: channel your inner blue and red. Attack yourself before somebody else does. So very quickly, I'll hit a few key elements: what's happening in the sector, what has Cisco's journey been, and importantly, what's our forward-looking view on the space. Just from an overall sector perspective, many of us were at RSA as well. I've got a page here that talks about RSA takeaways too. But I want to just distill the key secular trends that's happening in the industry, okay? And some of them are fairly intuitive. This notion of hybrid or cloud security, that notion is very real. I would say what's happened in the cloud space over the last 10 years is that 10 years back, people were accessing services from the cloud. But the big transformation that's happened now is that people are not just accessing content from the cloud, they're creating content in the cloud itself. They're creating and consuming content in the cloud. And in that scenario, you're completely bypassing the perimeter. A modern enterprise or modern company has employees who are sitting in Starbucks, who are creating content directly in Dropbox, who are sharing with their colleagues over WebEx or Slack. In this scenario, you're not hitting the VPN, you're not hitting firewalls, you're not hitting any on-prem infrastructure. What this means is that you need a purpose-built, elastic security stack. And we are seeing a lot of action in that space. Moving on, identity and zero trust. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of zero trust architecture. It's an architecture that was evangelized by Google, and it's found great adoption both among security practitioners as well as customers. But the fundamental thesis of zero trust architecture is that you should always believe that your network is dirty. So assume, doesn't matter what security firewalls you have in place, assume that network is dirty and there are dirty actors that are accessing it. How do you get around that? You aim for adaptive and context-aware authentication based on user, device, application, and services. So it is a dynamic, contextual, and adaptive enforcement policy that you're looking for. Finally, security orchestration. Hitesh spoke about it. An average enterprise, a quiz question. Can anyone take a guess on how many security solutions an average enterprise has? Average security vendors, number of security vendors. Take a guess. They have 700 plus solutions out there.
Wow.
And some of it is systemic. I was having lunch with the CISO of a large Fortune 10 bank. And this CISO, he's got unlimited security budget from the board. The board has said, we don't want any breaches. You've got unlimited security budget. What do you do if you have unlimited security budget and you want to prevent breaches? You invest in defense in depth. You keep layering up. So some of it is systemic, and some of it can be streamlined. But it spawned this important category of security orchestration, which are solutions basically which are integrating or orchestrating these different 700 solutions. So you may have firewall from Cisco, endpoint from Symantec, cloud security from Zscaler, but these vendors are basically able to integrate and orchestrate this disparate vendor sprawl. So that's another important trend that's happening in the space. The wrapper around this is continuous monitoring that I spoke about. No matter what solution you have, who your vendor is, always have your blue teams and red teams activated 24/7. I don't know how many of you were at RSA, but there were a few interesting, I would say, nuggets that I want to share with the group from RSA, because RSA is one event where you have 1,000 booths. At any given point in time, you have 100 or 200 meetings happening in parallel. It's very hard to make sense of that jungle out there. So I try to do my best at distilling the key takeaways. I would say what's really insightful about this RSA is the innovation sandbox. Every year, RSA has this innovation sandbox where they evaluate best up-and-coming architectures and technologies. And what was unique about this year's innovation sandbox contest is the contrast between who won the event and who was the runner-up. The company that won Innovation Sandbox is a company out of Israel called Axonius. This company focuses on unmanaged asset discovery. Think about it. Asset discovery and asset management is a problem that's been around since 1980s. We talk about legacy as it's a bad thing. But the reality is that when it comes to asset discovery, it was yesterday's problem, it is today's problem, and it will be tomorrow's problem. Call it legacy, call it modern, whatever, but you need to manage all these devices. So I think the judges recognize this when they awarded the winner, when they awarded Axonius as the winner. The runner-up, in contrast, is focusing on a problem that's been unsolved, homomorphic encryption. All of us are familiar with the concept of data encryption. Let me just distill data security for you guys. So most data security solutions focus on three elements: securing data at rest, when it's resting somewhere; securing data at transit, when it's moving east-west or north-south out of your perimeter; and the third element is protecting data when it's in process, when it's in memory. Now, most of these data security solution providers do a great job of securing data at rest and data in transit because you can encrypt them, and that's pretty solid. However, when you need to run data in operational data in memory, that's when you need to decrypt the data. Today, we don't have technology that will allow us to run complex algos on encrypted data. So when you decrypt the data, that's when the data is naked and you create this backdoor. We have this next breed of companies such as Duality that are solving the problem of homomorphic encryption, which is how do you run these complex algos while the data is still encrypted? And the reality is that it's a mathematical challenge. Whoever solves this, frankly, would win Nobel's equivalent award in mathematics. It requires a room full of about 500 PhDs to bury the differences and figure out an algo. And we have a company in Duality that's trying to do just that. Second, I spoke about this vendor sprawl increasingly. So 3 years back, if you spoke to CISOs, overwhelmingly, CISOs mentioned that we want best-of-breed solutions. We don't care about this one throat-to-choke vendor. I just want to be secure. I want best-of-breed solutions. Even if that means having 40, 50, 700 solutions, I can live with that. But increasingly, they're realizing that it becomes a logistical nightmare to manage alerts from 700 different solutions day in and day out. You're focusing on alerts that don't make any sense, and you're ignoring the real signals, which is why there is this concerted push towards an integrated architecture. And to me, as a Cisco employee or as a Cisco security lead for M&A, that's a super, super happy spot to be in. I would make a strong assertion that of all the players out there, Cisco is probably the one player that's best positioned to author an integrated security architecture spanning network, cloud, endpoint, and identity. You just need to look at our assets in this space. Next-gen portfolio from SourceFire, cutting-edge DNS monitoring from OpenDNS and Umbrella, Duo, best-in-breed two-factor authentication solution. AMP for endpoint, it's got great traction in the endpoint security space. I can't think of any other vendor on this planet that can really bridge these disparate infrastructure points the way Cisco can.
So you're excited about it?
I'm super excited about the trend. Yeah. 3 years back, I was a little concerned. Okay, CISOs want 700 different solutions. Which one should I advocate as an acquisition candidate? Which company should I invest in? But now I get it. They want one platform. We'll give it to you. I guess, spending a minute on the dollar volume that's going in security, both on the investment side and the M&A side. I'll focus on M&A in just a minute. But the key takeaway is that cybersecurity has been a frothy and very active space for the last couple of years. 2018 was no different, and 2019 would not be any different either. In 2018, about 400 plus companies raised capital for an aggregate $4 billion of financing. I see that pace continuing in 2019. Though there is one nuance though. What I see happening in 2019 is that fewer, stronger security companies and architectures will raise bigger and bigger checks. So you'll have the same dollar volume being concentrated on fewer players. I definitely see that happening. And that actually is happening already. If you look at the recent financing done by some key players like Cloudflare, Contrast, Illumio, KnowBe4, they were all growth rounds, but significant check sizes. And which means that most of the investors are realizing that there's a lot of noise in the security space, so let's pick a few winners and let's back them all the way. In terms of capital, we spoke about the private market, what's happening with the startup community and the VC activity. What's happening in the public markets out there when it comes to cyber? It's self-explanatory. If you look at the market indices, high growth cyber has outperformed all the other indices over the last 12 months or so. So I spoke about security sector summary, what's happening in the market out there. As Cisco now, your follow-up question would be, how are we tapping into it? And that's where our team comes in, and we play, I would say, we play a very important role in partnership with Hitesh's team. Just a snapshot of our security journey, the moves that we've been making, both from an M&A and investment standpoint over the last 4 to 5 years. If I were to be truly honest, and this predates my time in Cisco, so I have the full liberty to be critical here of Cisco. I will say that Cisco had the position or the opportunity to be the best-in-class security vendor and leave others way behind, just as AWS has done in the cloud space. We could have really owned the security space. I do think that in the period between 2007 to 11, we kind of took our eyes off the ball, and that's not a criticism of the company, it's just a reflection of other priorities that the company was facing. However, since 2014, we have made deliberate and very, I would say, bold moves both inorganically and organically. We acquired the next-gen firewall portfolio in SourceFire, which really refreshed and revitalized our firewall business, and it's a franchise that we're really proud of. While we invested in at the network and perimeter security, we were cognizant that the puck is moving to the cloud, which basically motivated us to initially make an investment in OpenDNS, and then do an outright acquisition in 2016. We call this solution Umbrella now, as most of you are aware. We doubled down on the acquisition of OpenDNS with the acquisition of Observable Networks in 2017. It does cloud-native monitoring and behavioral analysis. And very recently, super proud and super excited about the early data points that the acquisition of Duo is unlocking for Cisco. Along with M&A, we've been a very, I would say, active investor as well. Sometimes I think our success with M&A really does disservice to us on the investment side, because we're seen as an acquirer, but our investment effort and success stories get pushed to the shadows and to the back. But over the last 4 to 5 years, we've acquired about a dozen best-in-class companies across Silicon Valley, Israel, Europe, and these are sectors spanning email, network, cloud, application behavior modeling, to next-gen SIEM, which is what Exabeam does. So this gives you a snapshot of our recent moves from an M&A and investment standpoint. And I'd also like to talk to you about how we plan to build on this and where we've identified potential areas of action for us. So in my mind, again, this is just collating, and I think I'd be proud to say that we've managed to really collate our takeaways following conversations with venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, the conferences that we've attended, our discussions with the BU. But if I were to distill it at a high level, I would say that future of security, and this is no secret, I mean, this is not just, I would say, unique to Cisco. I see all of the security players also looking at these sectors. I see a lot of focus moving at the application layer. How do you provide security for applications, pre-deployment, and while it's in production? So for a long time, we've had this approach of doing static and dynamic testing, where you would build an application, and then you would either employ a Veracode or HP45 to do vulnerability assessment. And then Veracode would send you a paper, a 25-page paper document 2 weeks later, by which time you got new bugs. There's this growing realization that with DevOps, the velocity of applications have increased 10x. So you need to be able to provide self-healing security technologies, which is what players in the space of API security and code vulnerability are aspiring to do. The other sector that really excites me is this space of IaaS compliance and governance. We spoke about the vendor sprawl, the 700 different solutions. It also creates a governance and compliance nightmare. You need to check each and every government box to make sure that these solutions are talking to each other, that the right configurations are in place, that the right employees have authentication to the right applications. And that creates this huge vacuum where you have players like Cabrin and Cloud Conformity stepping in. We spoke about next-gen data centers, data security, so I won't beat that to death, and IoT security. IoT security is one area I would say that it's been touted as a promised land for the last 4 to 5 years, but I do think that it was ahead of its time 4 years back. It's kind of, I would say, assuming enterprise-grade scale now. I would expect to see more action in the space over the next 2 to 3 years. But the challenge with IoT startups is that IoT selling motion, as most of you would know, is a long 2, 3, 4 year sales cycle. It's very hard and it's very difficult for companies to keep burning capital for 3 to 4 years and not raise additional capital. So it is a bit of a chicken and egg problem, but I do see companies like Axonius, OT Clarity, and Centrio making progress there.
Also investors in Clarity.
We had a partnership with Clarity. And we are, from an investment standpoint, we're looking at different players in the landscape. All right, so what about our current portfolio? So you looked at the map, where are we currently investors? So if you look at this landscape, we have a good presence, I would say, across the landscape. Veridin, that's a company that you'll meet, based in the vuln assessment space. We have ThreatQ and Exabeam that basically are, think of them as Splunk on steroids. Elusive, which provides data center security and decoy solutions. And the other company that I'm super excited about is BehaviorSec. It's an insanely awesome technology. So basically today we have Ping, Okta, Duo. But none of these solutions, I would say, address the problem of hijacked session. Okay, Hitesh has been authenticated. His password, he's given his password, he's been authenticated. But what about the corner case where once Hitesh is authenticated, Hitesh gets whacked and somebody else poses as Hitesh? And there's no solution out there that prevents or protects against that corner case, which is where you have BehaviorSec coming in. So in my mind, the way I would phrase it is, it's easy to steal devices, it's very easy to steal passwords, it's impossible to steal behaviors. It's impossible for me to behave like Hitesh no matter what I try. And that's where BehaviorSec comes in. Because they provide that wrapper where they're looking at, okay, typically how has Hitesh swiped on the iPhone? How much time has he spent on a screen? He's never spent more than 30 seconds on the screen, but he's spending 3 minutes, and your session would immediately get terminated. And this use case is finding resonance in I would say, highly sensitive use cases like government and financial services today. And finally, I know we have Panos here and Veridin coming here to talk about the technology, and those two companies have awesome sales teams, so they'll present the story in great light. But I just want to provide a quick, I would say, backdrop of why we chose to invest in these companies. Again, it goes back to the whole thesis or assertion or continuous monitoring. No matter what solutions you have, you need to constantly test and score yourself. I think Coach Phil Jackson said it once, that if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. That's exactly the approach that we need to apply. The only way you can get better is constantly testing yourself. And which is what led to the investment in Panacea and Veridin. Panacea focuses on your internal vuln assessment and providing a risk assessment of which assets are out of patch or which assets are exposed. Veridin actually focuses on attack simulation. They've got automated red team actors that will break your system. And then they also quantify your response readiness. Okay, once you were broken, how good was your security posture in responding to these attacks? So together, in my view, the future of continuous monitoring is players like Panacea, Veridin coming together. And frankly, this is a platform that I see as the next Qualys or Tenable killer.